Hero mechanics have gotten a lot of attention lately, but there's a time and a place for them. Sometimes, it's the cornerstone of a game and it works well. Other times, it crashes and burns. And no matter how much you try, sometimes it just doesn't fit. Well, let's get into it. Before we get started, if you like gameplay discussions, extraction shooters, and are particularly excited for the upcoming title Arc Raiders, I invite you to subscribe to my channel. I will be heavily focusing on that as soon as there's more info to cover. Discord links down below, and now on with the video. Hero mechanics didn't come out of nowhere, and if you want to look back, you'll find that games have been using class mechanics in much the same way since online gaming has really been a thing. Early Battlefield titles really put this in use for the shooter space. You typically had a handful of classes to pick from, and they'll all have their own options on how to further customize their experience. The main benefit of this type of segmentation was to create a need for teamwork, as there were clear strengths and weaknesses to each class that could be covered by the other classes working in tandem. One of the problems that naturally occur in online PvP games is that over time, metas develop and competitive options start to dwindle. So eventually there is only one way to play any given class because all of the best in-slot options start to become apparent. Obviously, some games balance is better than others, but it doesn't just affect the most competitive portions of the game. Eventually, enough of the player base will adopt these tendencies and you start to get a lack of variety in the kind of gameplay this optimized setup can provide. The natural evolution of this kind of system is what has come to be known as hero characters. Hero characters are essentially kits, loadouts, or subclasses within classes. The majority of games that have hero characters tend to group them into general class archetypes. While it can vary, these archetypes are in almost every game with classes in them at all: tank, DPS, and healer/support. Depending on the game, a fourth class will be appropriate, but it rarely goes beyond that. The biggest advantage hero characters give over any generic class system is that you can fine-tune kits for both flavor and balance. Now imagine any hero shooter on the market today, remove the hero aspect and just leave classes and abilities. Then say it allows you to pick any of the available abilities for their given slot. I am sure it wouldn't take you very long to come up with some ridiculous combination, and likely the more competitive portions of the community would find the apex combination that would be mirrored everywhere within weeks, effectively relegating the majority of the abilities to a small pocket of the player base. And this doesn't just affect PvP games either. PvE games also suffer, especially at the highest difficulty levels, from the same deteriorating meta choice problem. Making these kits, or heroes as they're referred to, static, allows developers to create themes to lean into and then balance said themes to be effective within their intended use case. Of course, this will suffer from the same meta choice dwindling effect as every other game, but the balancing should in theory be easier to track and manage. This is because you have static combinations to balance and not potentially dozens of combinations. Creating compelling heroes to play isn't just about the balance either. The design is important, not just for the art of it, but also to convey intent. This is especially important for new players, as being able to readily look at a character and accurately guess what it's supposed to be is a mark of good game design. But heroes and even classes aren't always appropriate to include in your game. Sometimes they take away from the game more than they add to it. As I stated before, classes and heroes work best because they have the inherent strengths and weaknesses which promote teamwork. But this is really most valuable in a scenario where fairness from an equal starting point is the main balancing point of the game. Generally, PvP and even PvE games that have this in mind don't always need them, but generally their inclusion doesn't have too many negative effects. However, this is not true in the case of extraction shooters. Extraction shooters are more than what happens in the raid or even during a gunfight. There's a lot more to it than that, and if you want more detailed breakdown of what defines an extraction shooter, you can check out the video linked above and in the description. Generally, there's a whole economy and progression system that exists outside of the raid, and this is centered around the idea of risk and reward. You can bring in a lot of nice gear, but you risk losing it all when you die. Balancing that out is important to how you want to play the game. Introducing heroes that have static abilities and items completely undercuts this key portion of the game. And let's just name names for the sake of clarity. I'm referring to Delta Force, specifically Operations Mode. If you pick a hero that specializes in healing or smoke grenades, those are key item types that you don't have to manage. This is made worse if you don't run out of said items and don't lose them on death. It undercuts the loadout building, supply planning, and a portion of risk management out of the game in a genre where these are key features. Now you could defend it by saying some characters have access to certain items while others don't, and it brings the kind of balance that we discussed earlier. The problem of this so-called balance undercuts key portions of the game that define the genre. If I want to risk bringing in smoke and frag grenades, and I can afford to bring it, I should be able to. If I don't bring enough for the situation I'm getting myself into, I should be punished for it. And if I beat someone who hasn't used their items, I should be able to loot them for it. I'm the one running the risk and should be rewarded or punished according to those decisions. Never mind the fact that the so-called balance of this kind of system doesn't lend itself well to an in-game raid. This is especially true in Delta Force's case. These abilities were clearly built for their warfare mode, so some abilities will be insanely more valuable just because of how the extraction shooter genre plays out. Just a couple of examples: the radar wallhack bow ability that can confirm enemy presence, and a character with silent footsteps. You don't have a static team environment, so never knowing exactly where or when you run into players, if at all, is part of what helps build the tension of the game, a key component of extraction shooters. And conversely, being able to detect enemies when they're nearby is also important. Extraction shooters are always going to be plagued with ambushers or rats. It's not always avoidable, but good extraction shooters implement mechanics to try to mitigate it somehow. Being able to make zero noise while you move is too powerful to pass up. Abilities like this more than make up for their inability to bring in other items simply because of how the extraction shooter genre plays out. While you do run into some roadblocks, these types of systems aren't impossible to implement into extraction shooters. Unfortunately, the best example I can give on a better way of going about it belongs to a game that has an NDA on it, so I'm a little stuck on that. But what I can say is that you have to account for the risk/loss and loot management portion of the genre and make abilities or traits with that in mind. Hopefully, I'll be able to say more about that in the near future. And that's my take on how this trend is shaking out for the extraction shooter space. What's your take? Start a discussion down in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and good hunting.